So I really do want to thank you all for coming to this workshop, and I hope that it is helpful and informative of some of the things that we learn in school. My name is Brian Bates, and you may see me down below letting students in on a daily basis, and that's what I do during the day, but I'm a co-principal alongside Mr. Brandon, and I work directly with students and teachers, whereas Brandon will work in kind of the background of the school goings, which is why he does the school tours and everything else. But the topic, as you've seen for today, is creating a safe and nurturing environment. And so we'll actually talk about two sides of this today, and hopefully have a little bit of interaction from all of you. So please do be ready to participate when the time comes, and we'll explain how that goes when we get there shortly. First though, we really want to point back to what kind of hopefully everything comes from, which is our school vision. This is what we want our students to become. This is what we want them to be. So every decision that we make is supposed to flow from this idea of where we actually want our students to be. We want them to be responsible. We want them to be proactive members of the community. We want them to be reflective. We want them to be empathetic. And so everything that we do and everything that we implement in our school program has to fit within this lens of our school vision. And on top of that, the mission, basically how we try to foster that and facilitate that on a regular basis, is to have student-centered education, to have a holistic learning experience, cultivate students to be confident, to ensure a safe and nurturing environment, which we'll really hone in on today. Try to strengthen family and community connections, and then also celebrate this idea of international unity. So hopefully everything points back to our vision today, and hopefully something we can actually discuss about as we get closer to that. But the first part of safe and nurturing relationships, we like to think of ourselves as a holistic school. So if I were to say we're a holistic school, what would that actually mean to any of you when you hear the word holistic?
You're looking at the town as a whole.
It is. That is this idea of one big whole picture, and that academics is a part of that picture, but is not the entire part of that picture. Character development is in there, how they are dealing with relationships with other people, how they interact with the environment. All these things come into one big whole picture. So in this idea of a holistic approach, our focus and our big focus is growth in everything that we do, even from the entrance exam that allows students to come in here. We say entrance exam, but it's more like a placement test just to see if we have the capacity to take on who comes through our doors. Sometimes we do get some. We had some high school students that were grade 10 but scored at grade 5 mathematics. We took them on, and by the time they were able to go on to their next school, they were about up to eighth grade mathematics within 1.5 years. Now, they were not where they were supposed to be by their age, but they made a huge amount of growth with, and that was something that we celebrated. And so that's kind of our goal and our focus is not that we get everybody up to this benchmark level, but that we help facilitate this growth in our students. Not just academics, but also in the character development. So that's one of the big focuses we have in our classes as well, is actually not just talking about getting the top score, but how can you actually be a proactive member in your community? How can you actually show kindness to your classmates? How can you actually help make this place a good environment to be in? And so one way that we actually talk about this, and this is my time to kind of highlight one aspect of our curriculum, is a focus on these personal learning goals. So Miss Ritchie, since we're borrowing our classroom here, actually has them posted on top of the wall here. These are all really important points that we want your children to be. We want them to become. We want them to grow, and it's something we are constantly pointing back to in our lessons when a situation comes up, even if it's a disciplinary issue. These are the words that we're actually using and dropping out, because this is what we also try to use to guide students to where they ought to be and where we want them to go. So these personal learning goals. So our first kind of activity, so these are all of them here, but they are also up on the wall. The very first thing we'll do is actually have kind of a scenario activity. So I'm going to pass out some whiteboards to everybody here, and also some markers. So if you could actually help me pass these out to everybody. I think we got enough for everybody to have their own, so please go ahead and do that. I'm going to pass out some markers to everybody. So I'm going to be giving you a scenario. Everything that I'm talking about here happens at our school at one point or another, but I'm gonna be leaving out all names. And we're just going to, what I want you to do is actually, of these 8 personal learning goals, I want you to write down the one that you think would be the topic that a teacher would be talking about with this particular student. So in this case, the very first scenario, climbing trees. So at the start of the year, we have a lot of new students. They come in and we talk about some of the rules of using our public park over there. And we say one of them is we don't climb trees. Now, some people live around here and they go, well, I climb trees on the weekend with my parents. We go, hey, that's fine. While you're at school, there's no climbing trees. And so that's one of our agreements. But one boy in particular, we went out to the park and he started, looked right, saw no teacher, looked left, saw no teacher. Went and climbed up the tree, climbed pretty high, and went to go wave to his friends saying, hey, look what I'm doing. Fell out of the tree, hurt himself. A supervisor was quick there to be on the scene and help him, got him back in. He had a couple scrapes on his arm, brought him in, sat him down with his homeroom. Which personal learning goal do you think the teacher would be talking about with this particular student? So go ahead and take some time and actually write it down in your whiteboard, and we'll see which one you think it would actually be. Now, remember, if you write it down, it's not going to be just writing it down. We'll also be actually discussing why you think that would be the personal learning goal to talk about. And there's actually not one right answer to this, but what would be the conversation that we would actually have? All right, I see a couple answers there. Go ahead and think. Which one do you think? Can you share what you put, and then why?
I put respectful
Okay.
because one of the reasons that I would say don't climb on the trees is to show respect for our park and making sure we're not breaking limbs and causing destruction to the environment. So because that talks about the respect of the needs of living things, which includes the environment, I would go with that.
All right. And I see some of you have the same answer as well, though? All right. That's actually a very good point, and like I said, there's probably multiple right answers to this one. Is there anybody who has anything different besides respectful?
I put thinker versus
Alright.
respectful,
Okay.
because in everything that you do, you have to put your thoughts into it, and, of course, thinking about the right choice that you're making. So I would say, would you think that you're actually making a good decision by climbing that tree?
Mhm.
What are some of the possible things that could happen if you should?
Actually, that's very good, even actually tying the two of them together.
Right.
In particular here, in the case that we have at our school, the word that was dropped out was actually this one, ethical. And the reason for that was, hey, what did we tell you before we went out there? We said, you don't climb trees. And that was the direct rule that we set. We explained ourselves why. We said, hey, we're in a big group. We're trying to show respect to people that are out there. We can't vouchsafe for 60 students that are out on the park. So hey, while you're with us, you gotta follow these rules. You're with your parents and they allow you to go climb trees. Hey, have all the fun in the world with it. But while you're here, if this is a rule that we say, the ethical decision is actually follow that rule. Now, respectful and also being a thinker ties into that. But in this case, this is what the teacher had actually brought to the table with this particular student. All right, next one. So you don't have to erase, but the very next one that we have here. So grades 2 and 3 this very year went to, their unit is chocolate, or was chocolate, I'm not sure if it's finished or not. It's finished now?
Yes, so darling.
Still going, okay. So for their entry point, they actually went to Timeless Chocolate across the street. But before they went, at least one class in particular I know, had a very big chat with the students of one of the important learning goals that are up here before going to an outside, business. What personal learning goal do you think they talked about before going to Timeless Chocolate?
I would say ethical again. Doing the right thing. Someone might walk in there, chocolate,
I think that is an excellent one that would actually tie right into that, yes. So go ahead and think about what are some that you have, and you can actually write them down. We can actually see what it is. All right, anybody else have a difference besides ethical or any other?
And I just wrote communicator, just because you're out and teaching them maybe to be out in public and out in like a shop, and certainly around others just in the neighborhood, and how to communicate properly with workers and each other in a public environment.
Excellent. Actually, that's a very good way to tie it in. How you speak and what kind of way should you speak? Are these your friends? Do you talk like you talk with your friends? Okay, no, these are outside people. particularly for this one, what this teacher did was Mr. Yoshi, and he talked about respectful. And what he had said is, hey, you know, we are going to an outside business, there are probably going to be customers there. What do you think is a way that you ought to act and conduct yourself? I'm like, oh, we should be quiet. I'm like, yes, you should be, because other people are trying to enjoy themselves there. They're inviting us to their shop. They're actually taking their time to talk to us about chocolate. They don't have to do that. We're not paying them for that. They're just out of the kindness of their heart, they're doing this for us. Let's show that respect by showing interest and, you know, being respectful in the way that we conduct ourselves. And communication ties into that, and being ethical ties into that. And so when we were there, they were actually quite quiet. They were listening to the staff. They did very well. We even dropped down some money and bought some of their chocolate bars so they could test them back at school. And it ended up being a very good trip. They managed to be respectful because Yoshi's pretty good at instilling respect in the students that he has. Next one. This scenario is, so this is a picture that was taken by our student council group, led by Miss Jessica, who's actually in the back of the room there. And student council had the task of taking everybody's portrait picture and class picture and whole school picture for the yearbook. And although some may think, oh yeah, just line everybody up and take their shots. Well, it's not that simple, and they had lots of planning, lots of alternative days. Some students would be sick in this class and they'd reschedule to another time. They did multiple shoots at different times during their free time. They had to edit, they had to, you know, move things around, they had to adjust dates, they had to circumnavigate unforeseen chances, they had to fight with the weather on some days. But at the end, they did it. They actually finished it. We made a yearbook and we were able to share it with all the families a little while ago. A lot of effort that they put in that. And what is maybe the personal learning goal that maybe the Miss Jessica could have shared with that group at the end of this really long journey, to congratulate them on something that they actually exemplified. So write down what you think is going on. I got another one. Try this one. All right, what are some people have? Resilient. All right, and why is that?
Because they have to continue to pursue obstacles to reasonable.
It was really not easy. That is for sure. Anything else? Anybody have anything different?
Collaborator.
Ooh, excellent. They actually had to work with a lot of different classes, with a lot of different teacher schedules. They had to coordinate a lot of different tasks, even among themselves, about who's going to take the photos, who's going to edit the photos, who's going to help set the students up, what's the common idea, how we want them to stand, what are the themes that we want them to have. Yes, collaboration was huge in that. Anything else?
I would really say you can hit any of those really except for ethical in this, because it took so many different traits for them to
This is true.
succeed at their task.
This is true. Even the idea of adaptability would be very strong in
And-
here as well.
Yes.
You could even throw ethical in that they took appropriate pictures,
There you go. Which again, I think they had to struggle with as well. So, if I remember correctly, for this one we put resilient as maybe the big one because it was really challenging, and it was a monumental task for them. But they did it, and they did finish it, and it was something we were very proud of our student publications club for doing. And now they're going to do it again this year. So we'll see how it goes. Next one, scenario, we don't always get to choose a working partner. So in this scenario, there's a group project that's out there, and this student is put with maybe who in the class is known as the lazy students, who is constantly relying on other students to finish their project for them, and then trying to snag the same grade that that person gets. So the student, the hardworking student in that group, goes up to the teacher and says, "Why do we have to be with them?" What personal learning goal would that teacher have a conversation with that particular student at?
There we go. Oh, that's a collaborative. Just learning how to work with individuals, and it's not always going to be a picture perfect situation.
I think that's an excellent answer. Yes, collaborative is certainly. Anything else? There's, again, a couple of them actually you can't hit on multiple scenarios with. adaptable as well. You've got to work with things as they are, and you don't always have, you're gonna have the picture perfect partners in life. Anything else?
I would just say communicator, to try and communicate, because sometimes people figure out what motivates that lazy person. Like, if the only thing they wanna do is sit and doodle and draw pictures, if your project has that, say, if you do this, I'll do this, and let them sit, doodle, and draw pictures.
There you go.
Like,
Actually being able to communicate them in a way that doesn't let them know that you're extremely frustrated about their laziness. You know,
And
that's
that's
another
what's
thing as well.
funny is sometimes you talk to your kids about how they can actually, they have to look at that and they have to figure out how to work like you, everybody said, what you have.
Exactly. All of these actually really do point into the idea, but the big one in this one was definitely collaborator, just learning to actually work together with people who sometimes are very difficult to get along with. Because when you're out in the workplace in life, you probably all run into it. People don't come perfect, and that includes ourselves as well. So something we also talked about in this scenario, because we do a lot of group projects, and it's actually a conversation that multiple teachers have had to have. Because if they're not lazy, sometimes they're really stubborn and only want to do one thing one way, and you actually have to learn how to work with them as well. The very last scenario that I have here, maybe it's not the last, I think it's the last one, yes. Funny for some, but not for others. So in this case, this was grade 2 with Mr. Yoshi's class. They were testing out what different spices actually are like, and they were supposed to do like a smell test, and some of them tried to do a taste test, and that didn't work out well so for some of them. And yeah, they had quite the reaction, and one student in particular was like, oh no, oh it's in my nose, and you know, everybody else around thought that was really funny. But it wasn't really, the one who had it happen really didn't think it was funny at that time. And so what conversation would Mr. Yoshi in particular have with this student about which personal learning goal would they actually be talking about? The students that actually left, the one who got the spice up his nose. Empathetic.
I would say empathetic.
And everybody who has said it is certainly right on this one. We actually talk about being empathetic. And if you were to ask teachers, what is maybe the hardest personal learning goal to get students to grasp and understand, it is this idea of empathy. Being able to put themselves in the shoes of somebody else is such a hard concept to get across. But that doesn't stop us from trying, and so it is something we do try to get across with our students as well. So that was a few of the personal learning goals. How did you do on those? Again, it's kind of tough because there are, like we had already found out, there's multiple different ways, and even, you in particular mentioned, we can talk about any one of these in some scenarios and actually find ways that they connect. But these are the words that we use in the lens in which we had to talk with them. So one request from myself in helping us to create that safe and nurturing environment, we do see ourselves as a team, and we do see ourselves as working together, and when they're at school, you pass the baton to us, and we really try our best while we have that baton to help, to grow, and to guide, and to nurture. But then we pass the baton back when they're picked up and they go home. And so what we would encourage as well is even speaking using some of these same words at home, and when you're talking about school, when you're talking about things, or having these conversations with your children, actually bringing these in and helping us reinforce some of the things we're trying to do here. It'd be something that we would greatly appreciate, because the more they hear about being empathetic, eventually it will click. And so it is when there are as many people helping to go towards the same direction is when we have the greatest amount of success. All right, so keep your whiteboards. There's one more way we're going to need them, so keep them with you. But now another kind of discussion topic. So we are going to be moving now. So we talked about safe and nurturing relationships and how we actually use these personal learning goals to help facilitate when there's behavior problems, we point to them. When we're trying to prep students for certain activities that we're going, when we're even praising students for things, we use these personal learning goals. But now we're actually talking about this idea of fostering independence. So I've relied heavily on a book called The Coddling of the American Mind, which is essentially a book about how they've done studies with students who attend universities and find out that they are like fragile pieces of glass. And when one little problem comes their way, it's like their whole world shatters and they fall apart. And so they look at actually why is that happening, why is this such a trend, what are things that are actually going on, and maybe some of the solutions on how to get back to how we used to be. Because sometimes the pendulum swings one direction and we have some negatives, and then it swings too far the other directions, and we've got a problem, very same problem on the other side. So as we're talking about some of these things, this is probably a book that I'll be referencing coming back with. So we're looking at a comparison here, then and now. So I've got a couple different topics, and I'll actually ask for some discussion from all of you. What are some things that have actually, when we were all going through school ourselves, and how is it different for some of our children that are going through today? So the first one would be communication. So just asking all of you, what would you say is different for communication when we were all going through school, and how communication is now?
Technology, of
Well,
course.
we did not have cell phones.
There's a lot more technology going on, yes. I did not have a cell phone in my hands till I was 20, and I was surviving okay without it. Anything else? Besides the fact that there's just a lot more technology out there.
There wasn't, the information received from things going on in the world were very delayed. We had 6 o'clock news, we had 10 o'clock news, we had a morning newspaper, we didn't have constant updates of what was going on in the world.
It is instantaneous. Yeah. I mean, we found out about the war in Ukraine really quick, and everything is extremely fast and ready at our fingertips. Very, very, very quick. Anything else?
Like even how you share information from the school with the blogger,
Mhm.
emails. I know my school did that when I
Oh yes. You know, even in my school, it was notifications by paper home about what's going to happen. You know,
That
next
weekly
month.
newsletter paper.
The weekly newsletter paper, yes. But now it's actually all shared entirely digitally. Even last minute changes or things that have to happen. We had a bomb threat, a year or two ago, and that was really quick.
Oh,
We
it
were-
was for the whole Chaton.
It was all of
Yeah,
town actually.
all the schools and all the daycares.
All the
right?
schools and all the daycares, and we closed for a day because this guy said he was going to go blow up a school in Chatham on this day at this specific time. So, but again, we were able to get that information out very fast because of the communication that we had. So I do have a picture here to kind of illustrate.
And I only added it was all Chaton for the parents that weren't here for that.
Oh,
because
yes.
I didn't want them to think, what?
Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah,
Our
it's,
school's pretty modern.
and the thing about Japan is they do lots of threats, but they never actually follow through on them for the most part. So, which is a positive thing. Anyway, so knock on wood, hopefully that never does happen. So just a quick, then and now. Yes, if we were to kind of summarize it in a way, I would say more like direct versus multifaceted. So growing up, if we used a phone to call somebody, and that was it. We called somebody. We sent an email, and it was an email. But yes, everything today is all in one device. There's thousands of different ways that they can communicate, send messages, upload things, images. It's in their face, it's in their hands, and it's everywhere. And it's not that it's a bad thing. I mean, it's safer that way to have a phone in their hands that they can actually reach. But something that we notice as well with this idea of communication, what we'll be talking about more is when it's in their hands, it's very hard to regulate it. For my parents growing up, when my dad thought that I was watching too much television, he would unplug the television and say, "Go outside." And when I went outside, I had no means of anything because everything at that time of any kind of electronic device had to be plugged into a wall. So it was a very surefire way of making sure I actually played outside because there was no other way to connect it. But now you send your kids outside, if they got a phone in their pocket, they'll pull it out. There it is. So it is different. Again, we're not saying that one's better than the other, but we are trying to highlight it is different. And it's a different way that things go. Next one would be entertainment. Then and now will be different.
We had to wait for CDs to come out
Yes.
to buy the music. You have to buy the whole CD.
Yeah, couldn't just get the song you wanted. It wasn't instantaneous.
Now we hate commercials.
That's when you got your cereal.
Exactly, yes. Or when I had dial-up internet, like click on a site and go prepare something for 5 minutes, yes. Wait for it to come back.
It's not instantaneous. Or
Yep,
is
it
now.
wasn't as instantaneous.
There's a lot more access to maybe things you wouldn't want your children to have access to. Like, we were younger, it's probably a lot easier to regulate now, it's because of the technology, obviously.
Mhm.
We really have to just be on top of what they're accessing and how they can
even in the studies that show there was a lot more actual outside play, outside activity, outside things that they would do. And now, yes, it is much more sedentary, so I kind of have more active versus sedentary, is what you could put it. And like you said, that the device is a gateway to some of the most atrocious and wicked content that could ever possibly be found. And it's only about 5 clicks away. It's a scary thought, it's a sobering thought. And yes, there are checks, there are balances, there are safeguards, there are things that are in place, but there are also ways around them. And kids are smart, they can get around that. And so it is something that we notice even with our kids. They know words, they know symbols, they know things that in my time when I was that age, I did not know because I had no access to. But now, if there is no guidance from parents, again, it is a gateway to some very useful tools, but then also some very, very wicked stuff. And so it is a difference, and it is something that we do encourage our parents to monitor. Even coming in here, one of our questions, how much screen time do you have? And how is that regulated? So we can have a fair idea of, what kind of kids we'll have coming into our school. And it's something to be careful with. And again, it's not that devices are bad or evil, they're just tools, and they're different ways of doing things. And if they're used appropriately, there's no problem at all. And so that's one of the things that we wanted to highlight as well. Next one, unstructured versus free play activities. What would you say is different between then for us and now currently?
When we were younger, we would just be gone from the house for hours.
Imagination was a lot stronger.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think we do that to ourselves and to our children, because we don't trust, living here, I trust my child to be outside. Back home, I did not trust my child to be outside without me 2 feet from her.
Yeah.
So you've got that trust that we don't have. But because we know that they have the screen time, we feel like, you're only gonna go outside if I have you doing A, B, C, D, and I have you going and doing things. If I just take you outside, you're gonna complain and wanna go back inside, you're gonna wanna send a grocery on your phone. So
Yeah.
I need to have you, which then takes away from the opportunity to think and grow and.
Yeah. A good example here is even played in our picture. Not that it doesn't happen today, but the idea in today's day and age, we do have a lot of programs, we do have a lot of things in place. And yes, because we want our kids doing something, useful, and not doing something like, browsing on a phone, many times we do sign them up for clubs or soccer or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what ends up happening is, every activity that they do is structured by an adult, and there is no room to actually make their own teams or to actually try choosing sides, self-refereeing the rules. When I was young, I lived in a real backwoods, just in the countryside place where there's more cows than people, and there was a pond that was nearby owned by my great uncle. And in the wintertime, when the ice was right, I'd go out there with my cross-country skis a little bit distant from the road, have my skates in the back, go out in the pond, jump on it a few times, make sure it was okay, and then clear off the snow. Call my friends up directly with a phone. Hey, I got the ice cleaned off. And we started a hockey game. And it was a lot of fun. And we self-regulated ourselves, got a few injuries because we had none of the equipment necessary other than a stick and skates. Thought it was very nice. And again, my parents knew where I was. I told them what I was doing. But there was the chance to actually foster that. There was the chance to actually try that. And although, not one is not better than the other, but there is an aspect in which both are important. And so on that note, we do let our kids self-dismiss here. And we do let them go in. And it's refreshing for me to see when they're playing soccer amongst themselves outside and actually doing some kind of activity together. Not everybody's doing it, some are on devices or doing other things, but for those that are actually really doing that, we really value that as something, a chance for them to actually work out some things amongst themselves, and it's actually very good. So, people then and now, just to sum everything up, I do have a quote from a person, and I want you to actually write down on your whiteboards This is a famous person that I believe every one of you have actually heard of, and every one of you have heard of at least sometime in some history class. But I want you to write down the year or the time, like what century you think this individual actually lived. So I'll read the quote for you. Children now live in luxury, they have bad manners, contempt for authority, they show disrespect for elders, and love chatter in the place of exercise. Children are now tyrants, not the servants of their households. They no longer rise when elders enter the room, they contradict their parents, they chatter before company, gobble up dainties at the table, cross their legs, and tyrannize their teachers. Very famous person. I wouldn't ask you to guess the person, but what century would you say he actually, this individual comes from? Or what year, or what time? Take as close as we can. All right, what are some of the years that we got? I see 1960 there.
Yeah.
1980s, okay. What's
What's
that?
1960.
1960s, all right.
Early 1900s.
Early 1900s, okay. Any guess? What's you guessing about?
I would say 70s, I'm not sure.
70s,
Just
okay.
guessing really, honestly.
Actually, we're about 2,000 years off.
Oh, wow.
Socrates, 400 BC.
Wow.
So this quote is really refreshing to me in some ways because, okay, we haven't changed all that much. So at the end of the day, there are things around us have changed. And even the way that we do things have changed. But we as people, we've changed very little. We just have different things around us. And so again, if they were struggling back in ancient Greece, with the children that we have, we're still struggling today. And there is no difference, it's just different things around us. So with this idea and with this kind of background, we actually go into this point that we wanted to hear of fostering independence. And because one of our goals is that one day each one of your children will be able to go on their own and actually live and move and have their being and be successful and have joy in their life. We really want that. And so we have this idea of fostering independence and actually how we want to go about it. So there's a really important point. I have some parents who disagree with me on this point. And again, I respect everybody's opinion, but this is something as a school we try to recognize. Children are naturally resilient. They're not fragile. And a story I wanted to give. When I was 10 years old, I had to travel pretty far to the local park, because it was out in the countryside. But I was there, and it was a park. It was more in kind of what you would consider the town center. It was definitely not a city, but town center anyway. And I was riding my bike around the open space. And all of a sudden, two boys who looked a lot older than me and a lot neater than me started following me on their bicycles. And so I noticed that so I took kind of a weird path, and they followed me on that path. So I got back onto the main road, they followed me back on the main road. Then 2 became 3, then 3 became 4, and then when I looked behind, there were 5 people on bicycles coming after me. At that point, one of them said, "Let's get this kid! He's toast!" And man, did I ride my bicycle fast. I don't know if I've ever gone that fast before in my life, but I was flying away from them at top speed. And the park was pretty big, but I finally got to a zone where there were some adults sitting on benches. And that's like a safeguard zone in case you're getting chased by 5 kids. Sat down there, and they all drove past. They had some insults to throw at me as they were leaving, but I was safe. I was not beat up. I was not physically harmed, and I was okay. An adult turns to me and says, "Hey, you did pretty good out there." And I turned to my mom, and I said, "Mom, why didn't you help me?" She said, "I thought you were handling yourself just fine." So again, my mother was an extremely tough lady, and I knew if there was a problem, she's extremely fearless, and she would rip off heads if she needed to. I've seen her do it before. But at the same time, something my mom truly believed in was actually giving me a chance to actually handle problems and situations on my own in an environment where she could still be there in case she needed to be. So although I didn't totally agree with that one at the time, I still don't really agree with that one, but at the same time, she had the right attitude. She was trying to teach me to be independent and actually trying to help me solve some of my own problems. And the idea is here, children are naturally strong. they are naturally tough. They can take things and they can overcome things. They are not fragile. But some of the problems is if we remove every obstacle out of the road, we are preparing the road for the child instead of preparing the child for the road. Because there's only so far that we can go and pull out the obstacles. Eventually they have to face them. And if they're not used to facing them at a younger age, they're gonna have a very hard time facing them down the road when we're not there to be able to pull them out. So it's something to think about, something we as a school are also trying to think about how we can best foster. Again, we don't have like the perfect answer, but we do have where we want to go. So that's what we're trying. So the next thing here is this idea of risk-taking in a safe environment. So for us, what we do and even how we handle, disagreements and problems within the class, which happens on a daily basis, teachers actually do talk with them and actually say, hey, see if you can actually work this out. What are some ways that you can actually talk with them to help resolve this? Now again, if it gets to the point where it's dangerous or it's not safe, we step in. But we also do want to give them the chance to try talking these things out. Because later in life, there's going to be a point where they are going to have to do that on their own, and they're going to have to figure out how to do that. And if they haven't been practicing it up to that point, it's going to be like jumping into the deep end without knowing how to swim. So it is something we do at school, and we also encourage to try new challenges. If there's anything about today's day and age, which is the idea of a kind of a sedentary activity that is just very easy to naturally go into, something here we do is try to get our students to do hard things, to do challenging things. Even getting them to run on a regular basis. And Sam was very good about that last year. She's doing it again this year. Other teachers taking some students on some very challenging trips that actually gone on, where there's zip lining, where there's hiking trips that we've done in the past as well. We want them to try new things. We want them to branch out. We want them to face difficult challenges and learn how to overcome them. And so it's something we actually try to design and set up within our own curriculum. So again, another thing we try to point out is the freedom to fail without that label of failure. We want people to try, and we don't want them to be afraid of them coming back as a failure. So you will very rarely hear us say that somebody has failed, unless they've really just not tried at all. But it's this idea of, yes, it's okay to try something new and to not be successful at it right away, but don't give up. Be resilient and actually give it a go, another try. Even if it takes you 15 to 20 times, it's okay. Give it a go. And so that is part of that idea that we're trying to do in fostering that idea of independence. Because life is like that as adults. You're going to get out there and they're going to have a new world that was different than how we did when we had to tackle it ourselves. And they're not going to have all the answers, but they're going to have to figure it out. And hopefully they have the tools to be able to do that, and that's our goal. So I got some Japanese here, I'll keep going through. The next part of this idea of fostering independence, so it's rigor here. So this idea of rigor, and it's something, again, I will fully admit that as a school we don't have it perfectly down yet, but it's something we're working at, is that our children are challenged. And that every class, it is challenging, that it is difficult, that they do have to work hard. And that means physically and socially, and that means also this idea of growing holistically, that it's not just the academics that are hard, but also just the difficult challenges they have to face, that they have an opportunity to actually try it. And so it is this idea, hopefully, but the goal is, although it is challenging, we hope that we can make that learning process fun. And of course, that's what we try to do. And so we get to the point where actually taking on challenges becomes fun. And if we've done that, then the teachers have just a field day and it's just super soft. It's just a very happy moment when we actually have students who love learning. And we have that here, and we have a lot who do. And when we reach that point, it is just the teacher's dream. So hopefully it is something that, even for your child as well, if they don't love challenges yet, hopefully it is something that they learn to be able to love to do. Another thing of this idea of responsibility is we actually do try to give a lot of room for that even within our setting. Everyone here is actually, your child is actually in the secondary. That means your child has a responsibility already of actually helping out in the cafeteria. Sometimes it's serving, sometimes it's cleaning, sometimes it's supervising the kids who are eating, who don't always follow all the rules. And they actually have to help enforce those rules. So they have these given responsibilities. They also help clean the building on a regular basis. These are chances where they actually show that, and they show that responsibility. And if they do well with it, and if they can show us that they are responsible, it is coupled with more freedom, even more choice in some of the directions that they want to go. And even some of the teachers who are teaching classes, especially cooking, for example, if they show themselves that they can clean up after themselves, they can actually wash the dishes without being told how to do it, and they do it in a timely manner, they have so much more opportunity for what they can actually cook in the cooking class. And some classes have cooked astounding things. It's things that have just blown my mind. Not everything tastes good, but it looks good. And the reason they had that was because the teacher felt like they had the capacity, they were responsible enough to actually take on something more challenging, and they were able to push that. And they really enjoyed it. They really, really did. So with our high school students in particular, we've just opened up this year that they are allowed to go out on their own during that lunch period for an hour, where they can go out. They can eat outside or just be outside without any kind of supervision, because they've earned that right to be trusted. Now, if they break that trust, and we've got some rules, like they gotta sign out and they've gotta follow them, and they break that, okay, they lose that privilege. But that's something we actually try to give our students here, is opportunities for responsibility. And then, if they do well in that, then that's coupled with a chance for freedom as well. So yeah, again, so end goal, as I said, our students graduate with the ability to live successfully. That's what we want, and I think that's what all of you want as well. So again, as we work together as a team, hopefully that's something that we can eventually accomplish. All right, so now kind of the flip side of that, I talk about fostering independence, but now I actually talk about what we want to avoid as much as possible. So we wish to avoid abuse. So there is this idea, there are things that make one stronger, but abuse is something that will make you weaker. And again, so as much as possible, the flip side of that is we wanted to talk about how we try to ensure that our kids are actually safe here. Because we don't live in a perfect world, and we don't have perfect families, and we don't have perfect students, and we don't have perfect teachers teaching those students. So we have a school safeguarding, and how we actually operate that to try making sure that although yes, we have the chance for challenges, that we also have that idea of being safe. So we'll talk very briefly about that. But we do have staff training. Every year there's about a 5-hour course that our teachers will take about student safeguarding, best practices, how to keep an eye out for things that may come through the door. And they take that, there's kind of a refresher course that we take every year, and any new staff that comes in will also be required to take that online course. I've talked, maybe some of your students have shared it, maybe not, but I actually talked with every single class in the month of September, and actually talked about safeguarding with their class at an age-appropriate level. What kind of things to watch out for, what kind of things to be careful about. And the reason I did that is, besides being a school principal, I am actually the child safeguarding officer in the school. So if there is some kind of report that comes, it will come to me eventually. Maybe the students will share it with a teacher, but eventually it will come to me. So just a brief example of how this actually plays out. We do let our students self-dismiss at the park. One day, there was a 20-year-old who was going around talking to all of our girls that were about the ages of 13 to 15, and was trying to get pictures of them, trying to get their numbers, things like that. A student felt uncomfortable, came back to the school, told me, Mr. Ramel was there with me, said, "You want me to come too?" And I said, "Yeah, come with me." So we went over to the park, and the guy left. Sadly, I really wanted to meet him. But what I was able to find, I talked with all the girls that were involved, because he shared his social media, I was able to go become a follower. And I was able to actually find out, okay, he was a visitor coming here for a short time, he was just traveling around Okinawa, he was a kickboxer or something, trying to promote himself. Things like that. But I got a lead on him, I got his image, I got him how he looked out, and I was on the lookout if he ever came back again. I praised the ones who came and told me about it, and said, hey, if you ever find anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, we are right here at the school. Doesn't matter that it's a public park, doesn't matter that you're self-dismissed, we're here. And we will come if you feel uncomfortable about something. And so, that's how we handled it, and that's how it was gone. That was more of a public one because it involved a lot of different people. It's not always that way. Sometimes it is, a student who comes in who looks like their clothes haven't been washed for 4 weeks and they smell really bad. And so they'll tell me. And I only talk to the people that I need to talk about. I only connect with the people that need there is something else, and we do not announce it to the world. We only inform the people who need to know. So that's just a short example of how we try to deal with it in school. But one thing on this idea of school safeguarding, what we wanted to clarify is this word of bullying, because we really do want to take bullying seriously, and we really want to make sure that this is something that everybody else is aware of. But we just wanted to make sure that we defined bullying as we see it as a school, because what happens is the term has been used very loosely, and every little thing becomes bullying. And what's dangerous about that is it just dilutes the actual meaning of the word. And so when it's a real thing, yes, go ahead. When it's a real thing, maybe we're not able to catch it or see it. And so just so that you can be aware, we see bullying as it's a power imbalance. There is one person who is stronger, very clearly stronger than another in one way, shape, or form. Whatever is being done is done with malicious intent. So it's reoccurring, and it is happening very frequently. And it's targeted. Maybe it's a specific individual or a specific group. So these 4 points are what we would consider bullying. Now again, there are some students who get angry and go and maybe hit or something another student. Again, that's not acceptable. But if it only happens once, even though yes, it was malicious intent, but is it reoccurring? Was it specifically targeted at this person? Maybe not so. So again, when we take bullying, yes, we take anything seriously, especially if it's physical violence or anything like that. But if we actually, to clarify the term of bullying, we have to make sure that it actually falls under this category. So just wanted to show that before we moved on. So again, that's safe. This is our school safeguarding. Any questions about that at all? About school safeguarding? Okay. I'm sorry, I'm running out of time, so I'll try to go through the next ones here quick. So again, no school is a perfect place. So I do want to share very quickly how we actually track the behavior at our school. So we do have a category system. So this is for mostly negative behavior. If things are happening at just a regular disturbance that happens very often, or some kind of altercation with another student, we have a category system. So the very first one is category 1. It's recorded by staff, and then parents are informed by the homeroom teachers. If there's an even larger case where somebody actually physically punches or hits another student, some kind of very large level of violence, that would be considered category 2. That's a very serious one. We would be inviting the parents in to have a conversation, and that would be talking with myself and Mr. Brandon. And then the third category is kind of the end of the line. This is when either there's been a lot of repeated category 2s that have been happening, or just a very, very big altercation or something that has happened to actually deem that. But then at that point, we are talking about what specific changes need to happen, or there will be expulsion. So we do have this in case because, again, we will readily admit that not everybody can have success in our school, and that we're not the right place for everybody. And if we do have extreme levels of either violence or bullying or some kind of negative behavior that happens in the class, this is the system we have in place. We don't like it. We don't have to do it often, but it is there to protect and help keep a safe and nurturing environment for everybody else in the class. Now, besides the negative, we do actually try to do positive tracking as well, and this is something that is celebrated. So we actually try to share this out even with parents. So in class, for small excesses, we really encourage our students to give meaningful praise for things that actually have been well done. And if it's something big that they've actually done, like we have a professional golfer who's really good and has won a lot of tournaments in Japan for junior golf, we celebrate it. And we let the whole school actually know about it. Families are informed if it's something that's happened through school. So teachers are actually encouraged to share these successes, not just negative things. So if you get an email, hopefully it's not something fear and trepidation you get in. Oh no, what did my child do now? But hopefully it's actually something positive you'll see every now and then as well from teachers is what kind of success they're actually having within the school. So kind of our general guideline for behavior, we do correct privately. We try to keep it only with the individuals that need to know, but we try to praise publicly. And so that's for everything that we do. So again, just very quickly, how we can support, for all of you anyway, how you can support is communication with staff, just reaching out to relevant staff. Any kind of classroom matters or concerns, you can reach out to the homeroom teacher. If it's a school-wide matter or concern, we have open ears, and that would be your chance to email Mr. Brendan and myself. But just something to remember is just that respect from the kid. Our teachers do work very hard, and they do, try to support every student and family, but they also have families of their own. So on the weekends or after school hours, they are with their families. I have 4 kids myself. And so, when I'm home, I put on my dad hat and, go take care of being a dad. So, and that's the same for all of our teachers as well. So just keeping that in mind as well. The next part would be, just active involvement, which again, all of you showing up here is just demonstrating already that there's active involvement. You care about your child, and that's why you've come here. So I really do appreciate that, number one. But coming for school events, exit points, there was one, I think, yesterday for grades 6 through 8, so those of you that came, fantastic. And any open school days, we want parent involvement. Sometimes they go on trips, and many times parents are invited to come. Please do come. We enjoy it when parents do come. And just keeping up with the learning. This is one, because, if you come home, your child comes home and you ask, hey, how was your day? Yeah, fine. It's okay. But if you actually are keeping up with, what the teachers are sending in, you're like, hey, I saw that you just finished your exit point, your presentation, and I saw how you did in there. That was pretty cool. What was something that you found really interesting there? Then they'll have a lot more to be able to talk about, because you've actually connected with them on a deeper level than just, how was your day? So encourage this kind of conversations, find out what's going on, and really help to, because even talking about that will help reinforce what they actually talked about or not. So again, that's kind of everything, and these are some of the works that I cited for some of the things that I have. So that is basically it from my side. Are there any questions that any of you have about anything that we talked about? All right, well again, I really do appreciate you taking your time to